So how does the partnership between young, ambitious, highly talented, super smart founders and new people coming in, what were the key things to make that work really well?
Well, I was well aware of this John Sculley, Steve Jobs story. And you all are too young to have lived through it, but the fact of the matter is that Jobs needed somebody to be the CEO. The board picked Scully. The two had a fight. Scully went to the board. The board had to support the CEO because if they don't, the CEO quits. And the rest happened. Eventually, Steve left, formed a company called Next, and then, as you know, he very cleverly ultimately got himself acquired, and then within a month or two, got the CEO who acquired him fired and replaced the entire board. By the way, that's a Steve Jobs moment. That's very hard to do, certainly for you and I. Yes. Right? I mean, that's like an amazing achievement in and of itself. And it produced the most valuable company in the world. So it's clearly the right choice in hindsight. Well, I was very, very aware of this issue of founders and the outsider, and I understood I was the outsider. So from the moment I started, I knew it was their company, and I didn't get confused. It's their company, it's their company, it's their company. So what does this mean? I refused to do any press. And so as young executives and all sorts of press, they really enjoyed it. They had all these pictures, they were going to cover on Time and so forth and so on. And then they, right before the IPO, they did an interview with Playboy. No pictures, so we're clear. And the interview with Playboy was on roughly February 20th or April 20th of that year. And it turns out that the interview was at the wrong time in the cycle of being quiet period. And it put our IPO in jeopardy. So I still remember in August of that year sitting with them and saying, these are my closest friends, my colleagues. I really care deeply for them. And they have those long faces that people get on them, and they say, uncharacteristically, they said, well, did we screw up? And the correct answer is, yes, you really screwed up. But the even more correct answer is, no problem, easy mistake to make. I would have made this mistake, and we papered it over in a legally correct way. From that moment on, they've given no interviews.
Really? From that moment on?
From that moment on. Now, that was 12 years ago. And so what's interesting about that psychology is it's somehow, as young executives, they wanted it. But once they didn't want it, it was fine for me to do it. But intuitively, they need it. It is their company. It's not my company, right? I'm the professional that was hired. They're the owners. They're the founders. It's their company. And if you get confused on this point, right, you're not going to win.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Nowadays, the founders are much less likely to offer control the way, say, Pierre Omidyar offered it to Meg Whitman. There's an increasing sort of view of their own ability. And that's fine too. If you look at Facebook, it's worked really quite well with Mark, who's brilliant and young, by bringing in someone who is much more experienced in many, many things, Sheryl Sandberg. That partnership worked extremely well. So there's not one answer. Right?
Yep.